Watch Jake Horst snatch 145. There is not a single person that would see Jake Horst and be like, he's going to be an international medalist. He got third at Pan Ams. Dude, we're in the middle of a freaking cornfield in Fleetwood, Pennsylvania. Like, I'm not getting savages here. We're developing them.
That's Dane Miller. He's the owner of Garage Strength and responsible for coaching 15 Olympians, 60 Team USA athletes, and over 100 national champions across multiple sports like weightlifting, wrestling, and track and field. And in this episode of the Last Set Best Set podcast, we break down why athletes should be using Olympic lifts.
We know that these movements have a correlation to jumping ability, to sprinting. There's also a technical component, but if you suck at coaching, you don't want to teach technique because you are just bad, and then you make these excuses and you blame these movements. Learning how to do a hang clean or learning how to clean or learning how to do a hang power snatch or a power snatch, this is just as important as learning how to squat or learning how to lunge or learning how to sprint. These are patterns you should learn how to do.
Why Olympic lifters should be training more like athletes.
Weightlifters are like distant cousins to powerlifters, where they do lack some athleticism, and that athleticism can help them save lifts if they need to. There's a video of Haley that I like to use. She snatched 86 kilos. It was a huge freaking snatch, but she went up on the toes and then came back down and like did it twice. That save was because she had been doing so much of the plyometric work.
And the approach to programming that builds champions.
If Ryan back squats 280, he'll snatch 160. If Anna back squats 200, she'll snatch probably 115. That's the game. This is a formula.
Welcome back to the Last Set Best Set podcast. I'm Coach Brian. I'm the owner of Big Ben Strength. I've been teaching Olympic lifting for 11 years now.
And I'm Coach Calvin, current captain of Lindenwood University's Olympic weightlifting program, as well as a coach through Big Ben Strength.
And today we have a special guest for you guys today. You guys don't really need an introduction. This is Dane Miller. He's the owner of Garage Strength. They've got 15 Olympic athletes, 60 Team USA athletes, and over 100 national champions. Dane, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
We kind of wanted to talk first thing about learning the Olympic lifts. You've gotten a little bit of a reputation online for making fun of coaches who don't think that people should be learning the Olympic lifts. So I'm curious to know, like, in a world where everyone's saying that the Olympic lifts are too hard to learn or just do loaded jumps and med ball throws, it gets the same job done. Why should athletes learn the Olympic lifts?
In the world of like sports performance, and this is, I'm assuming this is the lens of this specific question. It's not necessarily just weightlifting, but in the world of sports performance, if I'm looking at training specifically as somebody with some thought process, if I see someone doing something that I'm not doing, I want to know, like, what is it that they're doing and what am I missing? And then the next step I try to figure out is, okay, what are they doing that I'm not doing? Where can I put this into my program? I'll play around with it myself as a coach, or as an athlete. I'll do things in the gym and I'll just try it for a while, and then I might have a couple athletes that I try something on. And so in the weightlifting question, I immediately go, we know that these movements have a correlation to jumping ability, and in other athletes, it has a correlation to sprinting, to a point, at least in the first 10 yards, 10 meters. We know that there's also a technical component. That's a huge concept. Having a skill-based action is very big. And if you are a coach who actually coaches people, one of the best ways that you can learn how your athlete responds is teaching them. And so when you teach them a technique, you learn how to interact with them. But if you suck at coaching, you don't want to teach technique because you are just bad. And then you make these excuses and you blame these movements. And so if you're looking at things as well, and these are the same coaches that will be like, oh, transfer of training, blah, 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 dynamic correspondence, Soviet Union, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, if I can talk about transfer of training and I can think about a pull, right? And I like looking at like a low hang clean, a pull, and then you receiving the bar and you're catching a bounce, you're doing a front squat. Like there's so many, you're increasing mobility. There's so many aspects around strength gains, rate of force development, max strength improvements, the technical learning, and finding how the athlete responds. So these are ways that I think are reasons why I think we need to be learning it. And then the other or teaching it. And the other thing is like, it's not hard to do it. Like we actually made a video where I went downstairs. So one of our guys on site, Taman, I said, Taman, like, how long does it take you to teach a kid who's, 15 how to clean? He's like, 8 minutes. Like, it's not hard. And so I know I'm going a little bit off from where your original question was, but it's a concept that I look at, like, one, it's low hanging fruit for the athlete. Two, it's a good engagement between the coach and athlete. And then three, there will be very easy ways to see where any type of movement problems. It's like a free movement screening. And then four, it's a very easy way to peak athletes of all different walks. Like right now I have a kid who's probably going to break the state record in the 100 back he's a swimmer. And I was talking with his dad about how we can peak him related to what he's doing in meters in the pool, what he's doing in the pool versus what he's doing with us. And it's like, well, look, this is how I would peak him as an athlete who is much more like endurance based to a point. And I would use the weightlifting movements to really set him up for his peak. So he still feels explosive. He still feels strong. And we'll see that also improves his broad jump, which correlates very well to him coming off the wall. And then the starting blocks, it's like, you start to see all these different connections. And I think the guys that don't want to do it, they just suck. Like, they suck at coaching. And I think, I had this discussion with Boyd Epley, who is the godfather of strength and conditioning, the creator of Husker Power from Nebraska, won 5 national championships as a strength coach for Nebraska. And I asked him that question, and he was like, he didn't know people actually thought that way. He was like, why wouldn't they do it? I'm like, they think it's too hard. And he's like, what do you mean they think it's too hard? That's like this is like learning how to do a hang clean, or learning how to clean, or learning how to do a hang power snatch or a power snatch. This is just as important as learning how to squat or learning how to lunge or learning how to sprint. Like, these are patterns you should learn how to do, and the coach should learn how to educate you on how to execute them.
And I think there's two things that are really important here. First is, the technique aspect. A lot of coaches will say that because it's a higher skill movement, athletes shouldn't be doing them. And I think that because it's a higher skill movement, athletes should be doing them. It makes no sense, right? Like, I think it's disrespectful to the athlete in a way, right? These guys are like world-class athletes, or generally at least very physically capable. And it seems to me more like you're projecting on to athletes that they can't learn the Olympic lifts, but you haven't given them a chance. You don't actually know if they can or can't. Just not willing to do it, right? That's one thing, and that drives me absolutely crazy. And then the other thing I want to push back on a little bit, and I want to get your opinion on this. People who say that, cleans or snatches, but mostly cleans when we're talking about athletes, they'll say that it takes too long to learn the skill to be able to do any sort of weight that might actually cause adaptations or carryover. I'm curious to know your thoughts on that.
That's easy, because a lot of these guys are the same exact guys who will do some type of trap bar jump at 50 kilos or even lighter. They're the same ones that'll say focus on movements with VBT at 1 meter per second, which I'm not against that, but that's the same argument. They'll say dynamic speed or speed strength is really, really important. Agreed. So the load, it wouldn't matter as much, and that discussion should get thrown out the window based off of their own type of how they pitch their training typically. And these are the same guys that also typically will attack the youth. They will attack the culture of society. They will attack all of these things because they expect that they're entitled to effort, but they don't want to put effort out themselves. And so really, that's sort of, I went past where your original question was. I think, look, if it takes you 30 days and you're working at like a theoretical 60% or 50% speed or a 50% load, that's okay. Like, that's perfectly fine. That could be your warm up. That could be exactly what you're doing as a warm up before you would go into your session. Last night, to answer this, I have a kid who I've trained since he was in 6th grade. He snatched 120 kilos when he was in high school. And this is a guy who's in the NFL. He plays for the Chiefs. Okay. He had a bench session yesterday. We just snatched 70 kilos off of boxes. It's like, does that mean that's bad? But he's a 240-pound dude who's a linebacker and he's just snatching 70 kilos? No, he just wanted to move. He wanted to feel his shoulders before we bench so that he felt stable. So the load discussion is also, I would just challenge them more so on what is their philosophy and what's their training thesis. That's the whole thing, is like, what's the thesis behind your system? And if you can't tell me my system is based off of XYZ, this is how we set it up throughout a year with these types of athletes. If you can't have that thesis lined up and have all things jiving, like then you're full of shit.
Real. I mean, people will just kind of pick exercises and that's really it. Like that's kind of the extent of their philosophy a lot of the time. Like they do exercises because that's what they did when they were in school, or that's what they see other people doing. But a lot of the time it's just outdated info, you know? Now,
Yeah.
I want to move from here into a question that we got when we said that we were going to have you on the podcast. The most common question that we got, especially from like old guard weightlifting coaches, was around your technical model for the snatch and for the clean, specifically in the second pull. So you guys teach a little bit more of an aggressive knees forward, or a scoop, I guess some athletes would say, or some coaches would say, of getting the knees under the bar as the bar passes the knee to create a strong power position. However, you know, the antithesis to that, the other side of that coin, is that athletes will, or coaches will say that we need to stay over the bar as long as possible. We need to not be pushing our knees forward and leaning our chest back behind the bar. Why do you guys teach the technical model that you do? Like, how did you come about this? Because I'm curious. This is the one thing that I still feel like I struggle with as a coach.
If somebody's teaching to stay over the bar past the knee, how are they staying over the bar without, how are they staying over the bar past the knee against what I would teach? Like if I'm visualizing a movement pattern, my question would be, what are they doing then past the knee? Like, and I think this is where we get lost, is like, I would want to know who's a model that they have. And if I go past the knee and I'm like, if I'm here and I try to stay over the bar, right? And I'm here and I'm doing this. So this is like their over the bar bullshit. So like, okay, cool, I'm over the bar. But now I have no quad loaded and I have no quad here. So now I'm putting the bar, let's pretend I'm snatching. I put the bar now it's a total hip hinge entirely. So I load the shit out of my hamstrings, which is great. But then as I finish, my chest comes back too much. And if my chest comes back too much, at least in my opinion, when my chest would come back too much, then my center of mass comes here. And then I have to move my feet backwards typically, or, I get on my, the other thing that happens is if my legs stay locked out too long, I get pulled onto my toe. Yes, there's some lifters that their heels will pop off the lift off and stuff. And there's anomalies to this, but most normal humans, if they stay locked out too long past the knee, they get forward too much. And then to accelerate, they have to hip hinge rapidly, and then the chest comes back too much. And when the chest comes back too much, they have to then jump back to save the weight, or to save that lift. And that's how I lifted. That was literally how I would do lifts. If you watch videos of me, I never was taught really like a proper movement at all. I was just like grip and rip from day one. That's how I would lift. That's almost how sometimes, if you think about Piro Stimos would do that to a point. So that's me trying to explain the antithesis to the anti knees under. That's sort of the cue I like to use. Now to answer this, right, to go back. So I wanted to try and think through what do they teach? So they teach this locked out position where they want their chest forward. I get it. Okay. I don't think if I'm watching, so initially I'll say, who are the greatest technical models For me, Quo is the greatest. The next might even be, if I'm looking at a longer limbed athlete, I would argue, there's some aspects of how Toma would snatch that are pretty clear with her movement patterns. Even if you're looking at someone like Liu Xiaojun, he's not super short limbed, he's not super long limbed, he's a pretty normal lifter. Off the top of my head, that's sort of how I'm thinking through this. So then, to answer this, I learned from Coach Zygmunt, who was at the OTC for a while, and then he went to Norway. He was a Polish Olympic champ. I learned from Piros to a point, right, and like how to really focus on floor to the knee. I learned from watching a lot of hook grip videos. I learned from Norik Vardanian and positions that he would focus on. And then I would listen to coaches at these international comps, and then I would film things, and then I would do these film studies. I've probably analyzed in Coach's Eye, which is this old app that doesn't exist anymore, but I still have it on my phone, upwards of 10,000 lifts. I do lifts and I do throws, and I'm just constantly thinking about it. But then the big thing for me was I was trained by a guy named Dr. Anatoly Bondarchuk. He's a Soviet guy. And when I was training with him, he had mentioned there's a weightlifting guy named Arkady Vorobiev. And so he had mentioned he was the guy before basically that coached Dave Riegert. He was the dude. And so I had his books, Vorobiev's books. And so I felt like there was a very clear position from the floor to the knee. The issue that I had was after the knee, if someone's knees do stay back too long, there's a gap that you'll see with the bar. And everybody will say the inches further past, the more the bar gets past your body forward, that increases the weight on the bar, like the feeling of it. And so I started to watch Quo and watch Toma, watch Liu Xiaojun, watch Jordan De La Cruz, watch the lifters that you would argue are like very even Norik, he doesn't like the thought that I put out. And then I would watch my football guys that had the best cleans. So I'd be like, well, how are they moving? And they would naturally move with this sort of rebend under it's a double knee bend. Like, it happens. Everybody knows it happens. And it's funny because I had this discussion with Will Rattel, and he's like, that double knee bend is actually a very potent, he thinks it's a very potent plyometric component. And I started to think about it from a physiological perspective. This is all drawn out over like 2015 to 2018, I would argue. And I'm going through, and dude, if you watch Quo at the 2017 Anaheim World Champs, and you don't think that you should lift this way, you're not paying attention. And people will say limb length. Oh, well, she's got medium-sized legs. Dude, okay, Toma, go watch her snatch. She snatched 120 at 71 kilos or whatever it was. Like, watch her move. Oh, well, she's, because she's got long legs. So where I'm going with this is from a physiological perspective, is that when the knee comes under, okay, the knee comes under, and now you have it's called a co-contraction. So now the quad is lengthened when the knee comes under. And if you are pushing, I think this is the big thing, and this happens in throwing as well, is that we will say not to do something because this could possibly happen. Well, there's other cues that, if I tell someone to push under with their knees under, sometimes, and Nassar does this a little, Nassar will go under, but then he bumps it forward and he jumps forward. He still makes his lifts, but he does jump forward a little bit, because I think, I'm not saying that I'm this genius that should coach Carlos Nassar, but I think if he held a flat foot longer, he wouldn't jump forward. So there's things that I like to really hammer in training. And if you have that double knee bend under, you get the knee co-contraction. When you have a co-contraction, if you're a triple jumper and you can co-contract in your knee and your ankle at the same time, which means your quad, and you have multiple muscles that are contracted at the same time, it stabilizes the knee. When it's stable, now it can produce more force. If I'm only contracting my hamstring by lengthening my hamstring and my quad is shortening, there is not as much stability at my knee joint. So my hip has much more of the action. I want the hip to come under and then the knee to extend so that we have hamstring, quad. And if you hold a flat foot past the knee as long as possible, you will finish vertical. Everybody talks about like the vertical finish, blah, blah, blah. You will do this. And someone like Anna McElderry, who grew up in our system from, day one, she's not a genetic freak, but she's got a pretty freaking good pull. Does she crash? Does the bar crash on her in a clean? Yes. There's things she does poorly, but she's got if you watch her snatch curve, like the actual snatch pull that she has is dialed in. Haley was the same way on her clean. Ryan's the same way on both of his lifts. And so the co-contraction, and to finally tie this back to Vorobiev, is that I was thinking all of these thoughts, and I'm looking at lifters and I'm learning from all these lifters, and I'm watching the videos, and there's an old school video of Vardani and Yuri snatching, I want to say it was like 190 or 180, 182 and a half, it might have been, actually, now I think about it. And you can see someone who has a very forward chest because he's got super, super long legs. And if you go in slow motion, when the bar goes right past his knee, you just see his knee come right under it. And that's when his chest comes up. And I think that I like to coach stay flat footed as long as possible. I like to coach put the knees under the bar. If the knees stay too far back too long, there's an issue. And it all goes back to page 77 on Vorobiev's book, maximum bending of knee joints in their push under the bar. Okay. Page 78. He even goes further in page 78 where he starts to go even deeper into this. And the vertical pressure is characterized by significant growth of pressure on the feet, then a maintenance of this force to the period of pushing of the knees under the bar when this force is reduced somewhat. And this will lead to full extension that is sharply then increased. And so the thing is like, we'll talk about the Soviets, and these old heads will talk about the Soviets. They'll say this technique's crazy. This is a Soviet technique. This is how the Soviets taught it. It's in Vorobiev's book. He taught Medvedev. He taught all these dudes how to snatch. And so when I started to think, and I pulled out the books from Dr. B, and I'm going back, so this is like 8 years later after training with Dr. B, I'm going back through and I have all my notes of how I want to have a model, and I'm reading and I'm going, this dude is teaching this. Why is it crazy for me to think this way? But it's like, oh, well, they're going to bump it forward. No, they won't bump it forward if they hold a flat foot longer and their chest comes up. So there's things that we have to think through that are nuanced. And some of the cues when I teach my lifters, like a young kid, I have a 13-year-old girl right now. It's like, yo, Loveland, I want you to be flat-footed as long as you can. And she will naturally do that. And we will actually use flat-footed variations. And then over time, we'll go to no feet. And then over time, we'll start moving and teaching how to slide. I think the biggest issue is that for the longest time, that the leadership in USAW was teaching you to jump your feet. And when you jump your feet like crazy, it's typically more from a hinged movement. And I think that's where there was a bigger disconnect. And I think there's good lifters that do jump their feet, but I am much more of a slide. For the majority of the population, I think it's better to slide your feet. I think it's better to have that push your knees under and to keep your chest coming up, and then and stay flat-footed as long as possible.
Tired of programming that doesn't work? Inconsistent technique, missing lifts, or going months without PRs is all signs that your program isn't working. If this is you, I'd like you to consider joining the OlyStrong team, my online weightlifting program available in 3, 4, and 5 days a week for weightlifters looking to dial in their technique, get strong, and most importantly, set PRs. Each week is structured to support the things all weightlifters need. Enough practice in the snatch and clean and jerk to dial in your technique, a consistent strength program to build big squats, pulls, and presses, and accessory work carefully chosen to build muscle that supports your Olympic lifts. The program uses logical progressions that focus on building momentum each week instead of just maxing out every week, or worse, only lifting light to work on your technique. If this sounds like something you need, then scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below for a free week trial today. All right, back to the show.
Do you think the Olympic lifts then like mimic mimic a jumping pattern then, or are they like pretty different, or where are the differences?
So I think that depends on who are you analyzing jumping, right? So like if we analyze a jumper, one of our guys, Evan Garrett, who's got a 44-inch vert, has a very much a counter movement. He's much more upright on his jumping. He will do a somewhat of a lower counter movement with the knees forward and the butt coming down. Someone like myself, who's much more longer limbed, I will have a bit more of a chest forward on my counter movement. But you watch some basketball players or triple jumpers and high jumpers, and their counter movement's really short and quick. They jump a little bit differently. So to answer what you're saying, I think the best would be like high hang or two boxes. You'll see more of it emulating the jumping pattern. But we'll also use, dude, I'll be honest, we'll use variations with wrestlers that are like a high butt lift. Like we'll do that. So there's a little bit less knee bend, but they're doing that to mimic sort of like positions they might feel on the mat. But yeah, I think that does mimic a jump for sure. I think you just got to be, when I try to, on social media, I'll push the shit out of something like that. But if I'm talking to coaches, I think there's a little more nuance because people have different jumping, like, organization. They don't all jump. We don't all jump the exact same. So I think it's just being aware that like a basketball player, triple jumper, they're gonna bilaterally jump a little bit different than someone who is a smaller weightlifter build.
Have you ever used a snatch jump? Have you done that exercise before with your athletes?
Like if I have like this and I go like that?
Yeah, like it like kind of stays glued in the hips as you jump with it. Yeah.
Maybe in college I did. I don't have that with my athletes. I don't think it's terrible. We will do more so of pumps, like snatch pumps. I like to do snatch pumps with like and this would be athletes specific, not necessarily weightlifters, but we'll do like a chest forward. So we'll go chest forward, knees forward. And if you go chest forward, knees forward, then I really want them to feel the flat foot. This is for like throwers, shot putters, D tackles, and we might do snatch pumps. And the reason why I like to use a snatch pump is it forces a rhythm, and they feel the load pulling them forward a bit more, so they have to be a little bit more precise with the pull. And then they notice like what that also feels like when they're on the field. And this would go back to the first question, is like, I can get an athlete to do a snatch pump. Sorry to get off the snatch jump question, but I can get an athlete to do a snatch pump, and they will start to feel from a proprioception perspective, like their weight's getting pulled forward, and they're basically wrestling the bar in a way. So if I have a DN that's got to bend and got to be really mobile, if they feel that sensation, I'm not saying it's a 1-to-1 transfer that when they get on the field and they got to dip and come through, that helps them in that position. But anytime that you can mimic sensations in their sport in the weight room, it helps them just be a little bit more aware of their movement pattern and how they're technically executing other patterns. And that goes back to what you had mentioned, Brian, is like, we should be teaching them as much skill work as possible, so that when they take their skills that they use in the weight room and they're on the field and vice versa, they keep thinking, their brain switches from meathead to, I always call it like technical aggression. Now they're actually technically minded, not just like I want to kill you minded.
Yeah, it's almost like if we give athletes more skills, they'll have more skills to work with.
Yo, it's funny.
Okay, I wanted to ask. So we've got some interesting stuff here with Athlete Day. I see you post about this all the time, and there's a specific instance. Calvin and I both got to go visit Hampton Morris and talk to his dad Tripp and his coach. And at that visit, Tripp said that he thought that you were the best coach in the country, and he said specifically the one thing that really comes to mind is your use of athlete days, because he's just nervous to use athlete days with Hampton because he's just worried about him getting hurt. And he said that like he really thinks that athlete days is something that could be really valuable, but he's nervous about it. So I want to know kind of what's your thought process behind using athlete days for weightlifters? And then after that, where do we start with an athlete day if we've got an athlete who's just been, sagittal plane warrior, snatch and clean and jerk, squat, pull? That's pretty much all they do. Like, where does somebody like me start with athlete day?
Well, first, to have Tripp say that, he's coached an Olympic bronze medalist and a world record holder, that makes me feel nice and warm and fuzzy inside. So I appreciate that, and I wouldn't necessarily say that that's true, but I think the thing around athlete day for us is, I'll say this, maybe because we have such a prejudice towards power lifters, right? You see a power lifter and they move like big and bulky, they move around. And then I see, I watch our throwers who will have throwers that are 300 pounds and they might have like a 35-inch vert. They might have a 9.5 to 10 foot broad. They can bench as much as a power lifter. They can snatch as much as a super heavyweight. They can behind the neck jerk as much as freaking Lasha almost, 250 kilos. So it's like, we can look at this and be like, okay, these are pretty good models that we can fall from as far as like impulse and power explosiveness would be defined. So if I'm thinking through the athlete day perspective, I have to take this. I say, okay, what do we do with our throwers? What do we do with our football guys? Football guys will use athlete day specifically on angles of cuts and depth and base off of their position. We try to analyze like I got a DN right now who's a dog D2 dude, and he really struggles on his right side because he had a hip injury this past year, so there's some trauma there, and so we're trying to clean that up to get that to fire a bit more. And how this links into weightlifting is that, one, if we're looking at it from the perspective of from somebody who split jerks, right? Oftentimes you'll see that they rotate. So if I split jerk with my right leg forward, I typically will catch a snatch and rotate that way. Okay. Sometimes you'll even see this in a front squat or a back squat. You'll see just like a little bit. And then the thing is like, you have to watch footage constantly. I've gone to world championships. I have 4 books like this filled with what leg they jerk with, do they twist, and I sit there and watch the entire session. That's how you got to pay attention to this shit. You've got to be on like, and I think like for me, and I'm bringing this back to athlete day, is like I'm looking at these athletes, right, and I'm seeing it's like this was in Uzbekistan in like 19 or maybe before COVID. It was like 92% of these athletes rotated towards their split leg in a snatch and in a clean. And I would assume this is also going to occur in a squat as well. And so what we try to do is, I think one of the fastest ways to solve neural issues. So usually this would be a recruitment issue initially, because they're so prone to recruiting in this pattern that sometimes it's hard in a slower movement to get the recruitment to occur so that they're more athletic. That's the other thing. What makes somebody more athletic is they coordinate better. They have better coordination. So they react quicker, and they recruit more high threshold motor units at a higher speed. So this also goes back to understanding physiology. And so if we think through faster movements, okay, so a plyometric or a depth drop, and we teach, okay, if we're doing a unilateral movement now, I want the lifter to recruit so that that we can mitigate those twisting issues. We can mitigate issues potentially in a pull. We can mitigate those problems so that everything is as dialed in as possible for that individual. These things will still happen, but we have to mitigate it, like decrease the odds as much as possible. So The other aspect then is like they might feel one leg is more sluggish than the other. And then guess what? Guess what we see when they go on force plates? We want to use freaking force plates, and we think this is such a crazy like concept. Oh, everybody's got to buy force plates, but then they don't want to do an athlete day. And this is not an attack on Trip either. This is more so from USAW. They'll go and they'll look on force plates and they go, oh, this is interesting. They're pulling more than on one side versus the other. Yeah, because of the way they freaking split jerk. Like, why did that take you the force plate to figure that out? If you were doing these other things, and guess whose athletes, even though they're not the most dog based, dude, we're in the middle of a freaking cornfield in Fleetwood, Pennsylvania. Like, I'm not getting savages here. We're developing them. Guess whose foot pressure is almost the most equal? The ones that have some type of high speed work. So there's that aspect. I also think weightlifters are like distant cousins to powerlifters, where they do lack some athleticism, and that athleticism can help them save lifts if they need to, or you don't want to teach anybody to have a lift out front or anything like that. But if they're a little bit more athletic, they are able to feel things like needing a double bounce, when to time the double bounce and stuff like that. Or if they've got there's a video of Haley that I like to use in Argentina in 2023. She snatched 86 kilos and she needed it. It was a huge freaking snatch, but she went up on the toes and then came back down and like did it twice. And actually it might've been her opener that I think she might've done that on, now that I'm thinking about it. And she came back and she saved it. And it's like, that save was because she had been doing so much of the plyometric work. Now the factor is like, where do you put it in the program? I like putting it the day before a heavier day. I do believe there's some therapeutic aspects of high speed work. The thing is like you've got to really, you can't go too much on the jumps. And we do a lot of static jumps where like we'll start on a box or something like that to sort of mimic the pull, because I do think that can help with the off the floor with the pull and with the foot pressure as well. And so this even goes back to what else do we do? We walk on PVC pipes daily. We are walking on unstable surfaces daily so that we can understand foot pressure, know how our feet are working, know where we're trying to apply the foot, the pressure as much as possible through the foot, so that we can be as effective as possible. That's how all of these things sort of play into the building of somebody who might not be as gifted genetically, but can make up ground in these little spaces there.
So I've done probably both with my athletes. Like I've done maybe a little bit of a dose of plyometrics every day, before their Olympic lifts.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also played around with doing athlete days, sprints outside, a lot more plyometric drills just on one day with basically no lifting or just accessory lifts. And I kind of always default back to that, like, a little bit every day. So what do you think what's the special aspect about maybe doing it all in one day, perhaps before the heavy day? Like what makes that kind of attractive to you?
I think our training is pretty intense. I think that like we are aggressive in training. We really only have like 1.5 days that are much more like dialed back. And I think having that extra day of not lifting, or we oftentimes will do like jumps. And then typically the way I think about it is if I'm doing these movements, if I do the unstable surface and then I do some type of movements that I think are related to their a weakness in their lift. So using Anna for example, she has a shorter dip, right? So I was noticing on her hurdle hops and box jumps, she sounds like a Clydesdale when she lands. She takes a super deep counter movement. I wanted her to maximize. She has a short dip. I want a short dip on her counter movement, and I want to see that transfer over so that when we get to big weight, she's more stable at the bottom of the counter movement of the dip. And so I think just separating it entirely and then at the end of the session, we will do something specifically to help, like a drill with a bar. Now it won't be heavy. So they will still touch a bar at the end of the session, but I think it provides like an extra day of recovery. And I think if they can think about the lifts outside of the platform, I just think there's a point in the week for a break. I'm not saying that this is like the end all be all. We don't typically do a lot of plyos before lifting, but I know that some people do and it works, right? Like I think that's another aspect. Is like I'm not saying I have the best split possible, but I do think from our experience with our athletes on site, it works pretty well.
So you're almost kind of thinking of like an athlete day or developing these athletic skills for weightlifters is like defense, almost like your technique and your strength is like your offense. That's what's going to move the most. But then being an athlete and being capable and all these other movement patterns is like your defense. It's what helps you get away with some extra lifts as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I would even say this: watch Jake Horse snatch 145. You know, this dude should never have lifted in his entire life. He should have never been a weightlifter. Okay, like there is not a single person that has a weightlifting brain that would see Jake Horse and be like, he's going to be an international medalist. He got third at Pan Am's. This is a dude that had no business doing what he did. And he snatched 145. Now go watch the 145. What's he do? Same thing as what I mentioned with Haley. Gets on his toes, and he's sitting, and then he's patient, and he comes back on it. And it's because of that work. I'm not saying it's exactly like, oh, athlete day is proven by that lift, but like I would venture to say it had some type of impact because he was able to move. And we do a lot of, like, as they would be called now, like deep tier work. We've done a lot of frog jumps. We do a lot of like split jumps, and people are always like, they'll see me doing weird shit on Instagram. It's like, dude, I'm doing this shit because I've played around in these positions, and I know our athletes, wrestlers, football players, weightlifters get into weird, deep positions, and we got to try and come out of them at some times. And literally, that's what happened on that snatch with Jake. And it's like, I think the way you pitch that as a defense mechanism is accurate.
So, okay. So from there, let's go ahead. I want you to program 3 exercises for people to try on an athlete day. Where do we start?
Okay, so I go PVC pipe walk would be the first thing. Usually we'll go something easy like if you could do a pogo hop or a mini hurdle hop, and you try to have as minimal knee bend as possible. Think about jumping rope, right? The next thing that we might do, I like to, there's a jump that we created for a penetration step in wrestling called the Gwiz jump. So you're like down on one knee, your lead legs up. So I like to do unilateral work there, and I might do a Gwiz jump to a box from a static start, and then we start to roll in. You could, instead of doing that, let's just say like a jump lunge. The issue I have with jump lunges is sometimes athletes get sore from jump lunges. So I've seen that the jump lunge can have a negative impact on the next day of training. The Gwiz jump doesn't do that as much. But I typically will go, okay, PVC pipe walk, let's say pogo hops. Let's say, skips for distance is a great one. And then hurdle hops, or depth drop to hurdle hops, or stair jumps. I really like stair jumps as well. So that's sort of like 5 or 6, I guess.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we'll give that a try and report back to you. Hobby weightlifters and competitors training might seem the same, but there's one big difference. Competitors need to hit their best lifts on the competition platform. It doesn't matter what you did in training if you can't perform when it counts, and your program should reflect that. Instead of following random programming, maxing out all the time, and hoping for the best on game day, our Competition Strong Team program focuses on long-term progressions that set you up to have your best competition day yet. Each training cycle is carefully designed around the USA Weightlifting National Circuit, so you'll hit your biggest lifts at the Arnold, the American Open Series 2, and of course, the National Championships. If you're ready to take your training to the next level and get platform ready, then click the link in the description below or scan the QR code on the screen for a free week trial today. All right, back to the show. I wanted to dive into a little bit parabolic periodization. So I've actually been reading through the book again, going through it now. I want to hear your breakdown of parabolic periodization and how it's changed since the book came out.
Oh, wow. That's pretty good. Okay. So this would have been like 2018, right? And yeah. I think the first place that I would start is I break down, there's 3 types of athletes. There's like the absolute, we changed the name, but we would call them meatheads, right? Like we changed it to someone who's more exuberant and puts out like a lot of energy in when they're training. So that's type 3. Okay. Type 2 is somebody, this would be, in the book, they're the social athlete. They're the individual who comes into training and they tell you everything that's wrong with their life. They stub their toes, somebody dropped them off, or somebody cut them off on the drive here. They have, they sneeze and they hurt their neck. Every little thing that you can think of, they tell you.
I think in the book you call them the fragile athlete.
Yeah, fragile is the original word, but we got some flack for not for being mean towards type 2s. And honestly, type 2s, I've had type 2s on world teams in multiple sports. So they are good. They're just more annoying. Now, type 1 would be somebody who's like a Zen style athlete. Like they come in, they do their work, they barely talk, they want to do everything, and it's like programming a robot. They might have emotional breakdowns here and there, but never outwardly aggressive like the type 3 or outwardly annoying like the type 2. That's in the book. That the names have changed a little, but that the way people respond to training is a key concept, and it's psychological. So that's like the first step, is recognizing the psychological component of programming is important. The clarity, the communication between those athletes is really important. If I'm taking someone like Ryan McDonald, who's a type 1, giving him smelling salts, slapping him on the back, slapping him across the face, he's not going to lift well. Like he's the type 1. That's not how he works. But if I take someone like Jake and did that, he's going to snatch 145. And it's like being aware of that is a big component. Now, what we've done since the book is we've really tried to specify like specific days of the week to hit specific types of variations. I've started to minimize my number of variations that I use in a program, but also that I really pull from long term. And the other aspect is that in the book, in Parabolic, I put off like we use undulating periodization, right? And I would say we use that the most on site, and that's where the model is as far as like alternating intensity relative to volume, relative to exercise type. Now, the big aspect that I've seen is I don't periodize anyone until they get to a certain level. So we have specific levels that they achieve. And then once they get to a certain level, then I start to periodize them more. And I think that was an important recognition for me. And for our on-site guys as well, is that like, I'll use Loveland. She's a 13-year-old. She broke all the youth American records at super heavyweight. She lifted in 2 weightlifting meets, and she's snatched 75, and she's clean and jerked 98 or 100 in training, but 95 at the comp at the American Open final. And she's in 8th grade. And it's like, Loveland is not like, dude, she comes in, she snatches, she clean and jerks, she back squats, she front squats, she single leg squats. Now she's also a shot putter, so she will do benches and she does jump, but she doesn't do any formal like super periodized system, because I'm looking at it now, going back through all my notes and all my time with someone like Haley as she developed to her world bronze medals. I think I threw too much at Haley too early in her career. And I think there's a time to like let the stability in the classic movements come in, then bring in variation, and then start getting a little cute with your periodization early on. If I only have an athlete coming 4 days a week, I don't need to go too crazy. I might in a session be like, yo, Loveland, I want to try and hit 3 triples at 70 kilos today, because once you do that, you're going to snatch 80 to 85. And that's just like the communication and the goal. She's a type 1. I tell her that in that session, based off of like me talking with DJ as well, because he works with her as well. Or if she has like a basketball or volleyball game, it might change. We're going to do 3 triple power snatches. But I don't want to spend so much time bogging myself down mentally over Loveland or another girl, Lila, right now, who's on the come up as a young stud, I think, because they just need to get the reps in. They
Mhm.
need. I always tell them, like, yo, we got to get you to have 3,000 to 4,000 snatches and 2,000 to 3,000 clean and jerks, and then we can really get nuanced with it. And once that happens, Loveland's probably going to snatch 100 and she'll clean and jerk 125 to 130, and then we can start getting a little bit cute with what we're trying to do.
So with these like classifications, is this kind of similar to like kind of like the old like master of sport classification kind of thing, or are you guys developing your own stuff?
So we have 4 levels, and we essentially sit there, and this is what we do with everything, other sports is included. We classify now, and this is a whole new concept, and I signed a book contract 2 years ago, and I'm still like doing all of this work, because it is actually like, it's not self-published, so I've got to have my shit together, and be very clear, is that we have a concept known as sport depths, and we have 5 sport depths. And so if you go sport depth 1 would be like a shot putter, a power lifter, a weightlifter. Sport depth 2 would be there's a little more locomotion. So now you're looking at like a D tackle, sprint rugby, stuff like that. Sport depth 3, they're combat athletes, they're wrestlers, they're boxers, they're jujitsu. Sport depth 4 would be a little bit more field work, like a lacrosse soccer player. Sport depth 5, these are endurance athletes. And so each category of sports, we have specific amounts of strength, explosiveness, speed, and endurance. Those are the only 4 qualities you will train in the gym: strength, explosiveness, speed, and endurance. And so a sport depth 1, it's mainly strength and explosiveness, right? Like it's like, how freaking strong or explosive can a weightlifter get? And then those are the 2 things that contribute to your success. And you've got to balance your squats with your technique and your O lifts. And so somebody in this realm, then we go, okay, well, a level 1 would be, let's use my son as an example. Level 1 for him as a shot putter / weightlifter is, he does play football as well, but let's just pretend he's 14. Level 1 for him would be if he's snatching, let's say 45 to 50 kilos, he back squats, 100 kilos. He's a level 1. A level 2 might be like the high school level type numbers that you would see. Okay, so we have these assessments at each sport depth. We have 6 assessments for each one that we deem as priorities towards their sports. And then we have internal numbers from the years of being a gym. We have internal numbers that we use from talking to other coaches. And then we have research-based numbers that we've pulled from actual research. And then we'll say, okay, for Lincoln, my son, a level 2 might be, he snatches, maybe it's 90 kilos. And then level 3 might be, okay, when he snatches 110, he's a level 3. That would be almost like a college level. Okay, now he's a professional level, he snatches 130, and that's where we that level 3, level 4 is really where we start to dial in the periodization. And that's where I would say, to answer the question about the masters of sport, that's where that would come into play, is like level 1, 2, you're middle school, high school, and then you become a master, then you become a grandmaster when you're at level 4. Essentially, you're a professional athlete.
Got it. Okay. So then let's see. So we don't have a ton of time left, and we kind of already broached the topic a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not as familiar with Dr. B, and I need to get into it. I knew we were having you on. I was like, I need to learn more about what's going on. And then recently, Dr. B passed away, and I know he was a big mentor for you. So one, I'm sorry for your loss. That is absolutely awful, and I hope you're doing okay with it. I want to know, what is the biggest lesson that you learned from Dr. B?
I think the interesting, that's a freaking awesome question, because there's so many things that I learned from him, and I think there's like a couple. There's like, look, and like he would say this, any system works. You've just got to have the key principles from a system. Like, you got to have measurables. You've got to have things that you're looking at on a regular basis that make somebody successful. You've got to have, and he would never say this thesis thing, but you have to have something that is like your guiding principle that then everything feeds into that. So I think the measurable aspect is a huge thing. And even for me, he would say the best. So he would complain, I actually have a Verkhoshansky has a book, Super Training, from Verkhoshansky, and Dr. B did not necessarily. He would complain about Verkhoshansky. He was cited in the book. I think it's chapter 4, and he's like, he spent too much time learning in the lab. He didn't spend enough time learning in the field. He doesn't understand these things because he never learned from athletes, and that's like another concept for me is like uh, having those measurables and learning from your athletes, and that's like the biggest thing I think for me personally is like my addiction to coaching is I want to constantly learn what we can do better by listening and watching how athletes are handling things in their session. And I think those are the two biggest parts. And that's also why I get stressed when like I have football guys that train when Ryan's starting to warm up, and I get stressed that they're going to have a negative impact on Ryan, and like and that Anna gets annoyed if Jaden walks on her platform. And it's like I see that, and I think that those, as funny as it is, it's like those are like two things. But then the third thing is like Dr. B would also say like any system works, right? And it's like being open minded to other people's systems and where they're at. I think those are the three big ones. And I think the irony is like if you were a Bondarchuckian, as I've heard some people call us, some of us that have trained under Dr. B is weird. It sounds weird that I'm identifying as an us. Um, a lot of people who work with Dr. B, they don't want to do anything else outside of like what exactly Dr. B did. And I don't think that that's necessarily the best way that I don't think he would, I don't know if he would really like that as much.
So with Dr. B, I just want to clarify some stuff because like I've heard, you talk about it a lot, Dane, but and I had a whole class, advanced strength training in university, and we talked about Dr. B a lot. Actually, it was pretty cool. Like we had to do some projects with, all the exercise classifications and do things like that. And was it quite literally doing the same workouts like every single day, like sometimes multiple times a day?
Think about this as like he was training mainly all throwers, and he would have impact on other sports to a point, but in my experience, right, I'll tell you like three types of workouts. You would have, let's say you throw a 9 kilo shot. The standard shot is 7 kilos. You throw a 9 kilo in the morning, and then you go and you lift and you do power clean, ab exercise, a squat exercise, and a back exercise, maybe a pad bench, um, a jump, and then triceps or dips or something, right? So there's like 5 or 6 exercises, and then you would finish with like disc, a movement that very much emulates your throw. So you're throwing, lifting, throwing, and the lift is every exercise is like 2 sets of 4 or 2 sets of 5. So you go through that. Now the abs might be like 2 sets of 10. You would do that in the morning, and then you go home and you nap, you eat, you come back at 4, and you do the exact same lift. Nothing changes. And you do it again the next day, then the next day. And you would go 3 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off, and you might do that for 6 weeks, the exact same shit. And then the next thing would be, okay, you have a morning version and an afternoon version. They're slightly different. But the morning you do in the morning on all weeks or on all days, the afternoon you do in the afternoon. And then a third version would be you take 7 throws, you come in and you do 5 lifts. You do 7 throws, 5 lifts, 7 throws, 5 lifts. So you would throw, lift, throw, lift, throw, lift. That's like a third version. That would be examples of, and you might do that only for 2 to 3 weeks. But those would be like 3 examples of, I would assume, I obviously can't speak directly for him, but like really establishing this like higher homeostasis for the athlete, and the organism, like being here at all times, and then really dialing in their specific strength, and their their throw in the circle.
So yeah, kind of like my impression was like that Bondarchuk kind of like cut out all that like sort of Verkoshansky fluff of science-based nerd stuff and made the system super simple so that he could really measure what things led to success.
Mm-hmm.
And from my time I spent with Hampton, so Brian dropped me off there. We drove from Tallahassee to Atlanta, and I ended up spending 4 or 5 weeks living with Hampton before Paris. And this is something that I noticed about Dr. B's kind of when I've heard people talk about him too, is that there was kind of like a moment where they know to move to the next phase of training. This is something Tripp was describing to me. He's like, he shows me their 4 phases that they generally do. They have phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's different exercises that go along with each of those phases. So, it sounds very Bondarchuk actually. Now that I, in the future, learn about Bondarchuk, I'm like, oh, wait, that was kind of Bondarchuk type. So, you got your GPEs, you got whatever, right? And, but he was very like vague. Like I was like, okay, so like you do it for like 6 weeks in phase 1 and then like 3 weeks in phase, or what are you doing there? And he's like, we know when to go. And I'm like, okay, but how do you know? And he's like, we measure things. I'm like, but what do you measure? Shows me, all this stuff, all the different, average intensities and tonnage and, his weekly total that he does on a Saturday. And I'm like, okay, but like, how do you know? And I feel like I never really got the answer. And because that kind of comes from Bondarchuk, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I think in that case, right, there's you could interpret it a couple different ways. Is like Dr. B would be like, you want to get somebody down, you want to keep them down, and you would be throwing so bad that like you'd want to like dive headfirst out the window and just end it, right? Like you want to go, like it was misery. But then there's days that you feel like a machine later, and he would see these responses because we would measure every throw. And if there's like a meet or something coming up, there's like days he would approximate the amount of days until you would hit a peak. And I think, I can't speak for Tripp either on this, but I think there is like a point of like, how long do you want someone to be down? How long are they down that they could be more exposed to injury? How long do you want someone to be up? Because you don't want them to be up too much and to miss a peak. So there's like the art of it, the voodoo behind it. And I think there's a point to that stuff. I think you can quantify it in a sport like weightlifting a bit more clearly than you can in throwing. And this is an unprompted response to this, is one of my criticisms is like Dr. B's setup is very much for a hammer throw, and the hammer throw has a large amount of tension throughout the entire throw, more time under tension, and it's a lot relative to a shot or a discus throw. And I think that there's a bit more success in the system for hammer. Now to go back to what Tripp is doing, I think there is a sign too. Like, I don't know if he's using VBT and he's seeing like a certain, there's football coaches that'll be like, like certain percentages moving at this speed on a squat or on a pull. Well, now we know it's time that we can either move on and get more aggressive or back off and give a couple days to try and elicit something, depending upon the time of year and the days remaining before the Olympics in his case. So I think I would argue, I would say that there's some impact there for sure.
Yeah, I think his programming, it seemed like Brian said when we got there that Tripp was singing your praises, but it seemed like his programming was very much impacted by, a lot of the sort of garage strength style, Dr. B style stuff. And how do you integrate, like that Dr. B lessons, that Bondarchuk method with your current weightlifting programming? Because I know it's more of a throwing thing, right? But how does that apply to your weightlifters?
It still goes back to having those regular measurements and seeing the consistent spread between the measurements. Like a easy example, okay, is if Ryan back squats 280, he'll snatch 160, very likely, based off numbers. If Anna back squats 200, she'll snatch probably 115, based off of her current numbers. So if we can play that's the game. This is a formula, and we can create the formula simply and with relative success of prediction, then the whole goal is how do we push her squat without being too aggressive, and how do we find the right variation? And I think that that's the biggest thing is like with Dr. B, we did a lot of crazy shit. Like you threw a concrete block, you threw a shot for height, you threw a discus, you threw a barbell like this. A lot of things that were very honestly today they would pop off if they were filmed on social media. And I think the interesting part is the variations is to me the easiest way to see it is like there's positions and points in variations that I think transfer over to the competitive lifts really, really well. And if you get very good at specific variations, those qualities will be seen in the competitive lift. And I think that's honestly like probably the biggest carryover that is sort of it's like this undertone that no one really talks about. But to me, it's like, well, we're using variations a lot. Like I also use competitive movements a lot, just like with Dr. B. I will also say too, our volume is intense. Like our volume is aggressive. And I think that goes back to that other aspect is like, and I do that in my throwing as well, but I also do it in the sense that I want our athletes so stable technique wise that when pressure is on, if they're in the right headspace, they can just turn their brain off and execute. And that's, this is to go into the throwing space. This year at World Championships, it was downpour raining. We were in Tokyo, circles wet, and I knew my guy was going to medal because he's so dialed in with the number of throws. There are very few throwers have taken as many throws as he has over the last 10 years. And I knew based off of that aspect and the conditions he's trained in and the amount of throws we've taken, he would medal. And we walked away with the world bronze in the discus. And it's like, that's the whole goal is creating the stability in the technique so that when the pressure is on, Haley is a good example. Haley sat for 12 minutes from her second attempt to her third attempt in 2022 at the World Championships. And I had asked her, do you want anything? Do you want to pull? Do you want anything? And she's just sitting there, no, I'm fine. And she fucking cranks 110 clean and jerk and wins a world bronze medal. And it's like, that is from the motor pattern and the consistent implementation of high volume. And I think that is another aspect from Dr. B, like directly from Dr. B, I would argue.
Speaking of variations, I'm curious to know, what are 3 snatch variations you think need to be a staple in weightlifters programs?
Ooh. Yo, I love this question. 3 snatch variations that every single weightlifter needs is a flat foot snatch, a low hang snatch, and a no feet snatch. Those are the 3 best that carry over. Now, I will say this, there's not a true partial movement there. I mean, the low hang you could argue is a partial. I do like using boxes. I do like using hangs from above the knee. But if I'm looking at developing a stable technical pattern, a flat foot snatch is extremely challenging, and it teaches the knee issues that I talk about without getting behind the bar too much. The low hang snatch is, I think, probably the best strength variation that we would use. And then the flat or the no feet snatch, I think, has the best ability to sort of unite all of the variation world into the competitive movement.
All right, let's go next question here. What are the 5 accessory exercises weightlifters can't afford to skip? And I don't want this to be like, squats, pulls. Like, I get that those are accessories, but those are staples. I want not the basic accessories here.
Yeah, that's a great question because I think that's where we also get a lot, like maybe some flack is like, why are we doing that? And I take some of this stuff directly from the powerlifting world and a lot of from sports performance is like reverse hyper. I think is you've got to do it consistently, regularly, all the time. I would argue some type of pull up. We like to do neutral grip pull ups all the time. I like to do dips a lot for tricep strength. If someone has like some people will have their sternum if you don't have access to like a V bar. Some people will cry about their sternum, and I'll say, I actually think you could do like a close grip decline, which I know sounds wild as a weightlifting coach. I like doing dumbbell benches, and I like to do seal rows a lot. seal rows, seated rows. We have a seated row machine that you can row like this, but we can actually go back and rotate. And I love that for building the upper back. And then we'll do a lot of like trunk work where like ab specific exercises, like um, an ab roller or a hanging knee raise with weight to try and hold a hollow position to train the core. So go back over, be reverse hyper, let's say reverse hyper, dips, neutral grip pull-ups. Let's say the hollow position, like a hollow body rock or a hanging leg raise where you're not swinging all over the place. And I'm going to throw in one more I didn't even mention. We call it the miracle grow, which is like a lat tricep ab exercise that I think is fantastic for being able to hold and be stable in the overhead position.
Bro, I'm surprised you didn't say the single leg squat.
I would also so while, like we would do if I see twisting a lot, that's like the first thing that we put in, and I would also put into warm-ups. Ryan recently he has like an issue on his right hip, and we've been doing single leg squats to warm up, but then he was feeling it doing these core rotations. We call them stall rotations, and he is like, this really hurts my hip. And single leg squat can alleviate a lot of things like that.
Nice. Okay, cool. All right. Last one here. Who is the best athlete you've ever coached?
Oh, fuck. That's a great question. I'll give you a male and a female. Like right now, I think defining the athlete. Okay, so let me play from this. Is like defining an athlete is looking at physical qualities and physical traits. Size, ability to recruit, speed, but then the hidden aspect is the mentality. And I think so I have a guy right now who will probably be a late first round, early second round draft pick in the NFL draft this year, Nick Singleton. He's a running back, and I think even though he didn't have a great senior year, from a physical and mental component, like this is a kid who was training 5 days a week when he was in sixth grade, and like would just show up, like he with zero pressure from his dad, like he just wanted to come train. And to me, that's a sign of a great athlete that has that type of work ethic and focus and ability. And this is a kid who cleaned 160 in high school. So clearly gifted as well. Ran a 408 in the shuttle, had a 38-inch vertical in high school, ran a 4.36 the first day he was at Penn State. So like he's very, very gifted. Sam Mattis is a discus thrower who's been to the Olympics twice. He's made 4 international world finals. Alex Rose just got third at the world championships in the discus. He's a phenom, 320-pound dude who can dunk. He was my first Olympian that I ever coached. He's been to the Olympics 3 times. I would probably say I would probably go with Nick on the men's side right now. And then on the women's side, this is a great question because I've worked with Jaime Perez, who's a world champion discus thrower, Olympic bronze medalist. She's power snatched 105 kilos. She's power clean 138. She has a 9.5 foot broad, a 31-inch vert, and the highest counter movement of forces on a counter movement that Christoph Kipp has ever measured from a female. She's a freaking dude. She's another world. You see her do shit, and you're like, what is happening? And she's got the mentality too. But the crazy part is, and I've said this, is the 13-year-old I mentioned, Loveland Zudi. She's done stuff throwing wise, and Jaime has seen her, and Jaime has been like, yo, this chick is a different breed. And that's the thing with Loveland, is she is so technically focused and so strong and explosive. She's got a 28-inch vertical as a 13-year-old who weighs 175 pounds. And she just front squatted 115. And it's like, racks it like it's nothing. And it's like, after she just like, I think she will break the high school American record in the shot. I think there's a possibility she makes the Olympics in 28 as like a 16-year-old representing Cameroon. Honestly, I think she might become now she's younger, so she does have the work ethic, she does have the focus, she has the technical aspect, she has the physical gifts, she has a great family support system. I think she has potential to do that, to do what Jaime has done. But right now, I would say Jaime is by far and away the best athlete. Like, when I talk to weightlifters about her, I'm like, you don't understand. This chick is not like, it's a different, and that intensity. You know, she's got the 9th furthest discus throw in the history of the world, and all of the people above her, except for one, were on shit tons of steroids. Like, and that to me is like, all right, the only one better than her is Val Allman. So that is clean.
There we go.
Sorry about that one.
I mean, that's the tough part when you coach so many amazing athletes. It's hard to pick just one, you know?
Yeah.
All right. So last question. We're doing a new segment here. You're going to kick this whole segment off for the whole year. We're doing take a question, leave a question. So we don't have a question for you. We want you to leave a question for our next guest. Our next guest, K.Speed, Chris Speed. What's your question for him?
I like this because I was thinking through this as like, in 10 years, when you look back on yourself in 10 years, what do you think you will be most proud of? Like 10 years from now, what is something that you think you will be most proud of, that you have a goal set for yourself currently that you're working towards? What will you be most proud of in 10 years? Because I think when you step back, it helps you identify like what do I want myself 10 years from now to be proud of? Like, now you have to establish, 1, goals, but 2, what is your passion? And whatever your passion is, better be having some positive impact on the world. And if you can project in 10 years and be like, I'm going to be most proud of this, now you're setting yourself up for some actionable steps. So I want to hear that from him, because that'll be I appreciate him. I see him on Instagram. I've talked to him on DMs a couple times, but I would want to know that what will he be most proud of in 10 years?
Dude, what an incredible question. So I can't wait to hear his answer. And we'll have to come back around and have you take a question sometime if we get you back on.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, we had like half our questions not answered still, I swear. So
I'll do a second one.
Let's go. Okay, Calvin, where can people find you?
At Calvin Lackey, 81 kg on everything.
And Dane, where can people find you?
Ghostface D Milla on Instagram, and then Garage Strength YouTube channel. Peakstrength.app is our app. It's our strength training app designed based off of everything that we do with our training here on site at Garage Strength. If you're an athlete, we have sports specific programs for you. If you're a coach, you can come in and train and we have a path called the Athletic Fitness Path, and that's in Peak Strength. You can download that in the Apple iOS store or the Google Play Store. And when you sign up for a year, you get 38% off.
All right. You guys can find me at Big Ben Strength on everything. We'll catch you guys next week. Bye.
Peace.
If you found this video helpful, then make sure to check out this video here or this episode of the Last Set, Best Set podcast.